You have already replayed this conversation 3 times. You have already run through every possible outcome of a decision you haven't made yet. You have already found 17 things wrong with something that hasn't happened. And right now, even as you watch this, part of your brain is somewhere else, rehearsing, analyzing, preparing for a version of reality that may never arrive. This video is about what is actually happening in your brain when you do that, and why stopping it is not about thinking less. It is about thinking differently. Stay until the end. What you are about to learn will not tell you to calm down. It will tell you why you cannot, and what to do about that. Before we go deeper, if this channel gives you psychology that actually reflects what you're going through, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. It takes 5 seconds. This is a channel built around psychology that respects your intelligence. Now let's get into it. Here is what is actually happening neurologically when you overthink. Your brain has a network called the default mode network, the DMN. It activates when you are not focused on an external task. It is responsible for mind-wandering, self-referential thought, imagining the future, and replaying the past. In most people, it activates and then quiets down. In the overthinker's brain, the DMN does not quiet down. It stays hyperactive, running its loops even when the person is trying to focus on something else. Research using fMRI shows that people who are chronic overthinkers have measurably stronger connectivity within the DMN and measurably weaker connectivity between the DMN and the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is where rational decision-making, perspective-taking, and thought-stopping live. When its connection to the DMN is weak, the DMN runs unsupervised. This is the biological reason that telling an overthinker to just stop thinking about it is as useful as telling someone with poor eyesight to just see better. There is also an amygdala component. The amygdala, your brain's threat detector, is consistently more reactive in chronic overthinkers. It treats uncertain futures as current dangers. The overthinker's brain is not broken. It is a threat detection system running at a sensitivity level calibrated for a more dangerous environment than the one they are actually in. Chronic overthinking does not develop in a vacuum. Research consistently identifies early environment as the primary origin. Specifically, unpredictable caregiving. When a child cannot reliably predict whether their caregivers will be available, warm, or responsive, the brain adapts. It begins scanning constantly for signals. That scanning, that constant reading of the environment for threat signals, becomes the brain's default operating mode. It worked then. It is the same system running now, in an adult life it was not designed for. This is why overthinkers often cannot identify a specific reason for their overthinking. The scanning does not require a threat. It runs because it was never turned off. There is also a perfectionism component that research identifies as a significant driver. Perfectionism and overthinking are neurologically linked, both rooted in an intolerance of uncertainty. Intolerance of uncertainty. The overthinker's brain reads uncertainty the same way other brains read danger. The unknown future is not neutral. It is a problem to be solved immediately. And here is the cruel paradox. Overthinking feels like problem solving. It feels productive. It feels like due diligence. But research shows that beyond a threshold, additional thinking does not reduce uncertainty. It increases it. More thinking produces more branches. More branches produce more uncertainty. The overthinking mind is trying to think its way out of a problem that thinking created. The cost of chronic overthinking is not abstract. It is measurable, specific, and compounding across 3 domains: cognitive, emotional, and behavioral. Cognitively, working memory is a finite resource. Every active worry loop, every replayed scenario, every anticipated problem occupies working memory space that is then unavailable for present moment function. Emotionally, chronic overthinking is exhausting in the most literal neurological sense. The sustained activation of the threat system consumes glucose and depletes the neurotransmitters that regulate mood and resilience. Behaviorally, the most functionally damaging cost is action paralysis. The overthinker generates so much analysis before acting that the cost of acting feels higher than the cost of staying still. Research shows that overthinkers make decisions of equal quality to non-overthinkers, but take significantly longer, experience significantly more distress during the process, and feel significantly less confident in the outcome regardless of its quality. And perhaps most honestly, chronic overthinking is strongly associated with anxiety and depression, not as a consequence of those conditions, as a cause and a maintenance mechanism of them. The thought loops maintain the anxiety. The anxiety fuels the thought loops. The depression is the exhaustion of running both systems simultaneously. This is not weakness. This is a system that has learned to sustain itself. Here is what 30 years of clinical research on overthinking, rumination, and worry actually prescribes. And it begins with a reframe that most people resist. The first intervention is not thought stopping. Thought stopping does not work. Attempting to suppress a thought increases its frequency. The intervention is cognitive diffusion. Cognitive diffusion, developed by Stephen Hayes in acceptance and commitment therapy, means creating psychological distance between yourself and your thoughts. The thought is not you. The thought is something your brain is producing. The second intervention is scheduled worry time, a technique with strong clinical evidence that sounds counterintuitive, but works because of how the DMN responds to temporal boundaries. You designate a specific 20-minute window each day as your worry time. When overthinking thoughts arise outside that window, you acknowledge them and defer them. The DMN accepts temporal structure in a way it does not accept suppression. The third intervention is the one with the strongest evidence base and the most resistance from overthinkers: physical movement. Specifically aerobic exercise for a minimum of 20 minutes. 20 minutes of aerobic movement reduces DMN hyperactivity more effectively than any currently available medication for rumination. It does this by increasing prefrontal blood flow and reducing amygdala reactivity simultaneously. The prefrontal DMN connection, the weak link that allowed the DMN to run unsupervised, is directly strengthened by sustained aerobic activity. The biology changes. Now the honest part. Because this channel does not traffic in false resolution, cognitive diffusion, scheduled worry time, and aerobic exercise are not cures. They are management tools. Chronic overthinking rooted in early environment and neurological architecture does not simply stop. What changes is the intensity, the frequency, and most importantly, the relationship the person has with their thoughts. This is the difference that matters. Not whether you have the thoughts. You will. But whether the thoughts have you. The goal is not a quiet mind. The goal is a mind you are not at war with. A mind you are not at war with. Because the war is the cost. Not the thoughts themselves, the war against them. Every overthinker who has ever tried to force their brain to stop knows this. The overthinker who has done the work does not become someone who never overthinks. They become someone who overthinks less, recovers faster, and is no longer ashamed of their own mind. And one more honest thing. Because the research is clear on this, and it rarely gets said directly, overthinkers are not intellectually inferior. They are neurologically more sensitive. The same DMN hyperactivity that generates the loops also generates higher empathy, stronger pattern recognition, greater creative association, and more detailed environmental awareness. The sensitivity is not the problem. The calibration is. If you recognize yourself in this video, in the loops, the paralysis, the exhaustion of your own mind, you are not broken. You're not weak. You are a person whose threat detection system is running at a sensitivity it learned in an environment that no longer exists. And the path forward is not to become someone who never overthinks. It is to build the three tools: diffusion, structure, movement, until the system that has been running your life starts receiving different instructions. The overthinking mind that has been your opponent for years is not your enemy. It is an extraordinarily sensitive instrument that was never given the right calibration. That calibration is available. It begins with the next decision you make. The calibration is available. It begins with the next decision you make. Subscribe for more psychology that does not look away from the hard parts.